People might be a bit confused to have a lawyer on a marketing show. Have you got any horror stories that you can kind of share with us?
Oh, plenty. The client was quite proud of their Google rating that they'd had, and rightfully so. They'd worked really hard over a number of years to have it at 4.95. A customer went online and made a parody TikTok about the pricing of the service. It was maybe 4 seconds in total. Within about 3 days, that video or that TikTok had 12 million views. So it was insane. And then overnight, it was just tanking with hundreds and hundreds of negative reviews. We've also had instances where, a very famous...
Emily Lucas, welcome to That Fucking Marketing Podcast.
Thank you.
Now, I know people might be a bit confused to have a lawyer on a marketing show, but what I know from being a friend, but also working with you in the past, is that you can explain the law in a way that people can actually understand. It can sometimes get super complicated and convoluted. So would love to have you on today, especially knowing that where I work, we do a lot of franchise, and that's kind of your specialty as well. So understanding how marketing and the law crosses over for a franchise, both for a franchisee and a franchisor. So let's get into it. So I think we want to position this for people today if they're running a business or looking after businesses, they're running campaigns, using gift cards, promoting giveaways, or even just works in a franchise and wants to know more. That's kind of your specialty, right?
Yeah, it is. So I'm a special counsel at HWLE Lawyers. I'm a corporate and commercial solicitor, but I do have a specialty in franchising and marketing disputes and marketing issues, structuring. Those types of things are kind of at the crux of what we're dealing with often.
And can you give us an overview of the last 12 months? What are some of the things that you've seen, like straight off the bat? What are things that people are just getting wrong?
Yeah, loaded question. Franchising is a very regulated area. A lot of franchisors will often run a marketing fund or a specific purpose fund now. And the code sets out a number of requirements in terms of documenting those expenses, sharing and being transparent with your franchisees about those expenses. And it's quite prescriptive in the manner in which you're supposed to provide, that detail. We're seeing, the rise of privacy issues become an issue because digital marketing often requires personal information to be collected from customers. We're seeing data hacks and cyber incidences that are occurring as a result of that. But there are also other hidey hole areas that some, novice players don't know about. So you've got the Spam Act regulations and making sure you're complying with those. Is the marketing generally misleading and deceptive? That's a problem that we're often dealing with. What else do we have? We have, everybody thinks that they're going to run a competition and a giveaway, but there's really specific rules that differ from state to state. So, there are a lot of kind of legal traps that you need to be aware of. It's not to say don't do it. It's just about making sure you understand what they are and then playing within the rules.
Yeah, and I think also my ethos, which I've said before on this show, is I'm always performance over perfection. And I think taking a step back and working with you in the past, knowing that we probably should check everything out to begin with, where do people start? I mean, franchise and non-franchise, where do people start to even understand this kind of stuff without just going straight to a law firm like you? Like, how can they just get the information?
The ACCC website is a really good starting position to just basically understand the obligations. But a lot of law firms do produce their own marketing material and they explain these obligations. Certainly on my own platform, I am trying to kind of demystify the law in this area because it's important that it is well understood and accessible to not just franchisors, but to franchisees and consumers. But certainly, AI is quite helpful, can be deceptive, but doing a basic kind of search on what exists out there, and then that kind of allows you to hone in and ask targeted questions when you do get the opportunity to snag a lawyer at a soccer game or something.
Awesome. And I think I want to start off with, have you got any horror stories you can kind of share with us? I love
plenty.
Talking to lawyers, and they've always got one or two stories that obviously debranding, but can tell us what not to do based on one of the cases you've worked on recently.
Yeah, so I've prepared 3.
Perfect.
Where do we start? So social media is obviously an incredible tool to be able to use as part of a marketing strategy for any business, but particularly in franchising. And it's really important that the franchisor is quite aware of how it wants to manage that and monitor that. I know that the first thing a lot of business owners want to do when they set up their business is get their accounts going and publish content and do the latest TikTok trend and whatnot, which can be great. But if you live and die by social media, you've also got the reverse effect that if it goes wrong, it can get really wrong. And so we had an instance where we were acting for a franchisee in this instance, and a customer went online and made a parody TikTok about the pricing of the service.
Yeah.
It was maybe 4 seconds in total. Within about 3 days, that video or that TikTok had 12 million views.
Wow.
And it was insane. I've never seen anything like that. The comments were so vicious about the business owner. Quite quickly, people worked out, despite the original poster not naming the person, the commenters had worked out where or who the business was.
Oof.
And then that led to just an onslaught of fake Google reviews. And we knew that they were fake because this business was located in Western Sydney, but the reports and the Google reviews were coming from Tennessee.
Right.
So in that instance, our client was quite proud of their Google rating that they'd had, and rightfully so. They'd worked really hard over a number of years to have it at 4.95. And then overnight, it was just tanking with hundreds and hundreds of negative reviews.
Heartbreaking, isn't it, for them?
Oh,
Yeah.
absolutely. And so we had to get involved and every night I was writing to Google and saying, these are fake. We know they're fake.
And Google's super helpful, right?
Yeah, they were. Well, in this instance, credit where credit's due, they actually were.
Okay,
once we
good.
could establish that there was a pattern. But for example, TikTok, less so. It was really difficult to just get in contact with them. In this instance, it escalated and, personal threats were leveled at the client and even still they didn't intervene. So making sure, stepping back, that you've got a clear policy to be able to manage that. We've also had instances where, a very famous women's Australian football team were here and they were doing very well. And in Australian spirit, everyone was jumping on board and wanted to support that kind of momentum. And the client decided that they were going to offer these women, girls, eat free situation.
Yes. Okay.
And most people took it with the right spirit. But its customers decided, a few customers decided that was actually discriminatory and took them to the discrimination tribunal.
Wow.
And they actually ended up having to settle the claim. It wasn't a huge sum, but that's an example of things do happen in marketing where you want to jump on the bandwagon and you do want to take advantage of a trend. But it is important to kind of take a step back and run it past someone just to, hey, is this okay? Is this going to cause more problems? It wasn't too damaging, but you can see that it could have quite quickly become so.
And I can see this also happening, I guess, with the rise of AI, right? Where people can jump on, get ideas out of ChatGPT or whatever, and then just run with it without even they would just think that it's kind of been vetted or fact checked.
Absolutely. And you can definitely tell because, who doesn't love a courtroom drama from the US? But a lot of the language people use when they're writing to you will mirror that. And that's a telltale sign that they've not had an Australian, lawyer look at it or they've gotten their legal advice from Dr. Google.
Amazing. So you and I are very big into the franchising space. We're both part of the FCA, both do a lot of speaking gigs. I'm really keen to talk to the franchisees and the franchisors that are listening right now. If I'm a franchisee and I'm considering a number of brands to sign up for, and I'm really interested in marketing, this happens to me all the time. If I'm super interested in marketing, what do I look for when choosing a brand?
Yeah, great question. So franchisors who operate a specific purpose fund or a marketing fund are required to prepare an annual financial statement detailing how those expenses are collected and then spent throughout the year. We've had a lot of case law about the level of detail that's required to be included there, but that document needs to be not only prepared every year, but circulated to its franchisees. There was an amendment to the code last year that now requires franchisors to include that in their disclosure document.
Yep.
So prospective franchisees should be getting a copy of that when they are reaching out to franchisors now, if they operate that fund.
Yep.
So the first thing I would be doing is asking for a copy of that document and sitting down and having a look at it and assessing, firstly, are they giving you the requisite detail? That's typically an indication of system health if they're not serious about compliance. But moving beyond that, scrutinizing their process, it will tell you, that it should tell you the agencies they're working with or the campaigns they're running or, is there a strategy? That disclosure document will also give you a list of current franchisees within the system and their contact details, provided privacy allows them to do that. And so I'd be picking up the phone and asking them and saying, hey, how has the franchisor supported you in marketing situations, or what's their campaign like? Has it been good? Is it tone deaf? And then I would also just be looking at it and thinking, okay, 2% of sales, can I do a better job?
Yeah.
Do I like their content? Am I on their social media pages? Do I agree with it? Does it feel authentic? Is it hitting the mark? Is this going
to grow my store, my brand?
Yeah. Is it focusing on one region that has absolutely nothing to do with me? Is it a bit daggy and cringe? Is it cutting edge? Is it professional? Putting your hat on as a consumer, but putting your hat on as a business owner who is essentially going to be paying for that and really and analysing it and saying, okay, do I see value in this?
Yeah, great. And then we work with a lot of emerging franchisors, and I always get asked the question, do I do a marketing fund straight off the bat, or do I do, let the guys just have a marketing budget? What would be your recommendation from some of the stuff that you've seen?
Yeah, so I'm seeing a lot of clients who typically had marketing funds come to me and say, this is a nightmare. Compliance is so difficult. It's costly. I want to wind it back. So winding it back is a little bit trickier because you've obviously got it in your agreements.
Yes.
But you don't have to have a marketing fund. That's a common myth in franchising. Yeah. There are ways for franchisors to regulate the overall marketing strategy for franchisees, and that's to require them to undertake marketing expenditure, and you might cap it at, a percentage, or you might say it needs to be X $1,000 a month. But then you can regulate who they use. So for example, if you have an approved agency like TFM that they work with, the franchisor can specify in their agreement that it's the franchisee paying for that agency, but they have to use one of a few or the nominated partner. And then they work with them to provide consistent imaging and a strategy, but one that's, I guess, localized for that particular franchisee. That kind of avoids the regulation side of things. Another strategy is to potentially take a royalty, let's say it's 10%, and then internally decide that 2% of that royalty is going to be dedicated to marketing. That avoids then discussions about, the franchisor's got a little bit more capacity to make its own decisions there as to where it thinks marketing is required, but it gives it more flexibility. Once you're in the marketing kind of fund space, it's quite rigid and heavily regulated, and rightfully so. I mean, the intention is to be transparent and to make sure that it's actually used for legitimate expenses. So we can't fault, its inception. We understand why it's there. But sometimes, like many regulations, it gets a bit too technical and then defeats the purpose or the spirit of why it was created.
I think I've worked on a lot of brands sub 30 stores, and I think not having a marketing fund in those early days actually works to their advantage, because you think about, you're trying to open stores wherever they are. If you're doing one shared budget across stores that are all the way from WA to Queensland, it's just not going to go very far. So I understand why the Maccas and the Subways have marketing funds at their level. Can a brand change later on? Can they start off one way and then change to a marketing fund or a special purpose fund later on? And how hard is it to do that?
They absolutely can. It is a little bit tricky.
Yeah.
And it obviously is more complicated the more franchisees you have. You have a contract with each of your franchisees, and in that you say what you're going to do in relation to marketing. So with that comes disclosure processes, and firstly, you have to get them to agree, and getting 100 people to agree to something, in my experience, is quite difficult, particularly when some of them think that they're experts in marketing.
Everyone's an expert in marketing, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And you'll see that they're not, but they think they are. So walking it back is difficult, but it's not impossible. And I've worked with brands who have completely changed their strategy in terms of marketing and other things. It just requires planning and, I guess, onboarding the appropriate skilled people to have those conversations, map out what it's going to look like, and offer a carrot to franchisees if they think that they can see.
Show them the benefits.
Yeah,
take them on the
absolutely.
journey.
Yeah, absolutely. Show them, perhaps as part of that, you create a consulting committee where they have input about what they think might work. So possible. Little bit difficult, but can be done with the right planning.
Okay, great. So if I'm a franchisee, still talking to these guys right now, and I don't believe I'm receiving the right level of marketing, or the spend's not going to me, what are my rights? What can I do? What's, I guess, the 3 steps you tell them to do?
Yeah, so assuming that they've got this marketing fund that has been established and it is a marketing fund, if I'm looking at an annual financial statement and I'm not happy with the level of detail, I'd be querying the expense items I'm concerned about and having a discussion with the franchisor. I write contracts, but the better systems put those contracts in the drawer and then don't deal with it. And it's a relationship. So they pick up the phone and they have a conversation about it. If they're not happy with that response coming back, then there are avenues to be able to, raise a dispute notice and formally go down some alternative dispute resolution paths that are either provided for in the franchise agreement or under the code. We are seeing that despite there being a lot of literature and case law about what is required to be in an annual financial statement, there are so many disputes still occurring with franchisees feeling or thinking that those funds, rightfully or wrongfully, are being applied incorrectly or not to their liking. Now, it's a spectrum. Usually it's somewhere in the middle. It's certainly not a clear-cut
No.
situation where it's obvious whether someone's doing the wrong thing with funds. And it's all subjective as well. You know, what we typically see the problem being is not that they're not disclosing properly or not that they're pocketing money, but that the marketing's not effective. And that's a different...
Wrong strategy, wrong messaging, wrong
Absolutely.
creative.
And that's an entirely different...
Yeah, it's not legal then, right?
Well, it's a line of argument. It's a different line of argument. It's not that they're not complying with their obligations. They're just not getting the outcome. And I don't know many franchise agreements that say we will 100% deliver an amazing,
guaranteeing results.
100%, and you're going to be a millionaire overnight. There's nothing like that in an agreement. But it's really important to distinguish, are you happy with the level of information you're getting, or are you unhappy with the results that are being implemented? And if it's the latter, then that can be worked upon. It's about having a discussion with your media agency, perhaps meeting with the franchisor's marketing team and being asked to be included in that strategy. Does the franchisor have a consulting committee? Are they involved? Why do you think it's going wrong? Do they need more education? Often it is performing.
Yeah, I mean, in my experience, there's one or two franchisees who have either come from marketing in a past role or something like that. They want to have just their voice heard, right? So it's hearing them out, sharing more information with them than others if that's needed, and just taking them on the journey and letting them understand the reasons we're doing this channel or we're using this budget for this is because of X, Y, Z, right? And then after that, they're pretty okay with it. And then they can also educate the rest of the franchisee group themselves.
Absolutely. Winning them over and having an ally in the group is so important for franchisors, someone who believes and sees the journey and sees where you're going with it. But I think that education piece is something that I want to circle back to. I know personally a lot of people say, why do you waste time publishing, content on LinkedIn? You're never going to get anything from it. And to that I'd say, well, I have data that tells me quite the opposite, actually. Yeah. I'm getting approached for more opportunities. I can see when people are sharing the content privately to themselves. I can see when they're saving it. I can see how many people are engaging with it. That is more information than I've ever had in terms of hosting an event or going to a networking function, for example, which are traditional marketing events for lawyers. So I think giving them that information, there's so much data available now, just sharing that with them and saying, hey, this is actually what it's telling us. This is what this campaign has actually done. You can win them over and then, to your point, convert them so that they are advocates for you.
100%. So let's switch to the franchisor side now. So talking to both emerging and established franchisors, what do they need to know for 2026 in terms of marketing their franchise?
Yeah, so the code has changed in terms of how certain disclosures you need to make for your annual financial statement and what's required to go in your disclosure document. So firstly, you should be speaking to a specialist franchising lawyer when preparing your disclosure document to make sure that you are hitting those disclosure points. I think franchisors need to be aware of this far earlier than what they typically are. So for franchisors who operate a special purpose fund, they have 4 months from the end of their financial year to prepare this annual financial statement. They're often doing that at the last minute.
Of course.
And it's tricky because it requires interaction with your agencies and your marketing team, and who they might not necessarily be aware of the level of detail that you need to provide. So they might produce a document for you that they think, that explains it. I know what that means. You know what it means. But it's not legally compliant. So starting that process as early as you can and onboarding the right people at the right time is really critical, because unfortunately under the code, there are specific timelines that franchisors need to meet, and there's no ability to apply to the ACCC or to the government and say, hey, can I have an extension? It's a drop dead date.
I think you told me a horror story recently about this happening with a brand, right?
Yeah. So it's certainly, their marketing agency came back and said to me, oh yeah, here it is. And I said, okay, well, there's 4 line items and the expenses are quite large. So unfortunately this isn't going to comply. Yep. And so they're like, oh, look, our guy's away. Can we get back to you in about a month? And I said, absolutely not. No. So I think to answer your question, they should be, getting involved early, speaking to actual specialists who understand this compliance framework, but also building tools that allow you to get it right the first time. So for example, I've worked with clients to build spreadsheet or reporting matrix that allow them to kind of allocate or code the expenses so that you can press a button at the end of the year.
Does it for you.
It exports it and it's 90% done, and then it requires a bit of finessing and polishing from myself and from them. But
But
it's
how
those
much
times.
easier would everyone's job be, right?
Oh my
Your
gosh,
job, the media
particularly mine.
agency,
Yeah.
and the actual franchisor's marketing team?
Absolutely. And I think the trap that franchisors fall into here is that the marketing strategy is often the heartbeat of the system. It's what they're talking about at town halls. It's what they're emailing about. It's
Mm,
the updates. It's when they're catching up, they're talking about how this campaign's rolling out or how this is working. And so they fall into the trap of thinking that, oh, well, franchisees know what we're working on because we've been talking about it all year, or we've had a call about that, or I sent an email. And this annual financial statement needs to be a standalone document. It
yeah,
needs to be a document that I, a person who's not a franchisee of this system, can pick up
understand.
and who's not an
Mm,
accountant can understand exactly where the money has gone during the year and what the plan is. We often find that we're just getting profit and loss statements, have no notes, and are just line items.
you
And,
can't
and
do
it's
anything
quite
with that. Yeah.
yeah, and it's quite concerning because some of the line items are $12 million, and you think that's a
I think
lot
it's
of
it's
money.
bringing it back to the purpose of why you're in the game, right? Like I know we're all about impacting people here, and it's like these are people's livelihoods. This
Mm.
is where they've invested their money to look after their family, have a house. So they want to know where the money's going to. How can they grow year on year?
Yeah, and they do it on the promise that it's going to be beneficial for them. And if they're not seeing that reward, then I think logically and emotionally, you can understand and empathize
Yeah.
why they want to say in it and why they want you to deliver.
Do you have a favorite franchise brand campaign that comes to mind?
Oh, good question. You know what? I don't want to be PC about this,
Mm,
but I think so many of my clients have so many amazing campaigns, and it's because I understand the inner workings of their brand and I
yeah.
understand what they're trying to drive at. So I was actually at a brand launch. I won't name the company, but a uniform business, and it was just so authentic to that brand
Mm.
and the imagery and the music that they used and the voiceover. I actually had tears in my eyes because it was
Good.
just,
The emotion came.
yeah, but I
Yeah.
was so proud of them and proud of what they
Yeah.
would be able to create. And I don't, shop for work boots
Yes.
often, no, ever. But I just really felt it. And I thought, and you don't have to be part of the marketing team to have contributed to that campaign. I'd seen, the legal come through and I'd seen the strategy and I'd seen, the planning of territories and all of these things work together to be able to deliver this campaign
Mm.
and then roll it out and just to see that as the product of what everyone had been working on. I was really proud. It was a really, really beautiful moment.
Awesome. Mine would be I worked on a gym brand a little while ago, and again, emerging franchisor doesn't have budgets to go out and create a $100,000 TVC or something. So this is when TikTok was really starting to roll out. So every location, against my better judgment, had their own TikTok. So they were a bit nervous about everyone jumping on TikTok and just making content. But then what they did was they stitched all the best pieces of content together and that became their TVC. So then you're getting right to the heart of each individual location's like team members, their spirit, all that kind of stuff, and rolled it into one national brand creative and it looked amazing.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
think people need to take a step back and like you in a franchise system, you have over like 200 people between locations, between managers, staff that work there, even customers. Get them involved.
yeah,
People loved it. I think we gave the franchisees an incentive of the top 5. We'll give them $200 towards their media spend next month, and everyone jumped at that.
yeah. And I think when you bring people on the journey and give them that opportunity to have that creative ownership, you start to see that passion
Mm,
comes alive, and you can feel that when you're consuming that content. You can tell when a campaign has been through 50 sets of hands and they don't
yeah,
really want
it's
to,
not genuine anymore.
yeah, and they don't want
Yeah.
to lean into anything because is that too funny? Is that too risky? And certainly something I've adopted with, my own branding
Mm,
is trying to stay real at the heart of what I'm doing. Obviously, you need to wear a lot of hats and be aware of how this could land with different audiences, but keep it true to mission,
mm,
keep doing what you're doing because you know your people and your people know you, and more
yeah.
importantly, and showcase that.
So for any brands that are worried about, I guess, relinquishing control a little bit of things like TikTok or, encouraging their franchisees or, anyone to jump onto these platforms because of some of the stuff we've talked around, getting in trouble for only inviting girls in for doing that sort of stuff. How do they navigate that, or what's your advice to encouraging more of that?
Yeah, I guess conservative franchisor lawyer me would say don't. That's my natural reaction. But I do acknowledge that, momentum and trends happen overnight, and there's ideal timing to hit that trend so that it
Mm,
takes off. So, a nice common approach would be have them submit the content to you for you to look at.
yep.
Invite them, to have a discussion with you about why they think it'll work. What's telling them, what are the drivers behind why they want to publish this piece of content? This is really good advice that was given to me by a mentor of mine, and it goes for
Awesome.
emails, goes for content,
Yep.
but sit on it for a day.
Yes.
Just sit
Yeah.
on it for a day. You're not going to lose a lot of time and momentum in that day. But having a fresh perspective, having a sleep on it, things can happen in the world and stories can happen overnight that had nothing to do with your post, but
Mm,
it gets published and then it intersects with something that's happening and it can look tone deaf. And that's where you start to see people being cancelled or brands being cancelled because all of a sudden there's a
mm,
war or there's an outbreak
yes.
or there's a tragedy and you're posting a funny little dance. So timing is helpful, but invite them to have that discussion and then work with them to enable that in a safer way and slow it down as opposed to saying no.
There is so much money being spent on meta ads at the moment. And I'm not sure if you're aware, but there's been a lot of ad wastage recently. We have actually released a TFM Digital local area marketing playbook for ditching the digital skid bins, where we will show you exactly which channels to activate to get real return on investment, how to get people into your shop, how to get people online buying your products. DM us Playbook on Instagram to get your copy today, or have a look in the show notes on this podcast.
Yeah, awesome. So I'm going to get off script for a second just because I came to my mind. So we're actually developing an app which includes AI. So AI is a very hot topic at the moment. I think people want to jump on it, but they don't know how. So what we're building is it's a standalone app that every franchisee and a brand could download and use. We want the franchisor to upload their colors into it, their fonts, suggested posts, and essentially the franchisee at the start of the month could go, I want to talk about this, this, and this. The AI would create the video or the image and the copy and actually schedule their entire month's social. So my whole goal with this is to take the franchise owner away from being the marketing manager and go back to being the business owner.
Mm-hmm.
What do I need to know from a legal perspective to roll this out?
Yeah. So you're asking as the person who owns that and who's
Yeah,
doing
we're
this.
about to roll it out.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think getting your terms correct
Mhm.
in terms of, appropriately saying to anyone using it who owns the copyright material.
Mhm.
That's a really live issue that my colleagues in the
Okay.
IP team are dealing with. And that's because copyright subsists in human creation. AI is obviously not human.
Yeah.
And working out the intersection between what's generated versus what's been uploaded to generate that. So, for example, you might upload your logo and your trademark that you've registered and you've got protection over, but how does that intersect when it's, put into an app that then spits out a different image? Where are your legal rights in that
Yeah.
final product? So that's something that's really murky and difficult to kind of walk through. Making sure that your terms of service clearly say that you're not responsible for any material that they upload that might be infringing on someone else's mark, for example. So if I, put a golden M on there and say
It's
Emily,
mine. Yeah.
making sure that, you as the owner acknowledge and the user acknowledges that you are going off their instructions and that they've done their due diligence and that they've got an appropriate license to be able to use that. I guess, yeah, and enough disclaimers in there to make sure that, it's whatever it produces, it's because it's been led by the individual who's engaging with that content. If it spits out and says, take this, you'll grow your hair 400.
I mean, the AI can get it wrong, which is what I'm worried about. But we're obviously working in the background to make sure that it's super locked down with different scripts and prompts, that kind of stuff. But what happens when the AI does get it wrong and something's posted on a page? What is the ramification of that?
Yeah, so you're likely to have someone who, and this is something that I worry about myself with, using songs, for example, in the back of a video. Do you have the license to be able to use that? Now, I actually don't know the position in terms of TikTok and Instagram. And usually I would assume that there's a license there that if you are using that, then using their content that's featured on that app is permitted. But when you lift that, for example, and say put it on LinkedIn, I don't think you've got a license to be able to do that.
No.
So there is a potential for someone to say that you're infringing upon their confidential information, or perhaps you're using, maybe you're using a logo of theirs that you don't know exists. You could end up with, a cease and desist letter. It could be more serious. They could be asking for money from you.
And how real is this risk? Like if I'm listening at the moment and going, oh, I'm already doing that, should I go and delete it all or should I just leave it? Like, I guess, has there been any cases that have come across your desk where this has happened or?
Yeah. So what we're seeing at the moment, and my colleague, Luke, who heads up our IP team, we had a chat about this actually, and he was telling me that what we're seeing is that fonts can actually be registered. And keep in mind, AI is being developed based on existing work. So it's naturally taking something that exists and then remodeling it. So you are to an extent borrowing from other creative platforms. Font is a really interesting one where you can register specific fonts. So he told me that Star Wars font is actually registered. So if you were to go and say, Emily is a good lawyer in Star Wars font, then I could end up with a cease and desist letter there. So doing your due diligence first, making sure that you don't go and create a whole campaign and suite of colors and font style and pay all of this money before doing the necessary searches is paramount, because you don't want to have to then defit out a whole business because the signage is wrong or the colors are wrong. And then taking that letter that you get potentially from their lawyer to a lawyer and saying, what does this mean?
Yeah.
Is this serious? Is this a shakedown?
What do I need to know?
Yeah. And so, some companies are buying those license for those fonts, scanning the internet to see where they're used, writing to people and saying, you are using these. Yeah. You have been using them for X number of years, and based on our calculations, you owe us $4,000. Now, that is actively happening. And you need someone who's kind of experienced in this game to understand, is this a shakedown or is this legitimate? Does this have legs? How can I commercially resolve this? Might be the case that, you have to destroy. I actually had a client who prepared some marketing packaging material for the goods. It was alleged that it was infringing upon someone else's copyright and design. And so we were able to strike a deal that we didn't have to pay for the content we'd produced historically, but we did have to destroy what was sitting in the warehouse. Yeah. And that in and of itself is quite expensive.
Heartbreaking.
Yeah. And it's just such a waste. You've got a whole warehouse of material sitting there that, had you done a quick search or had a quick conversation with someone like myself, we could have probably got to the bottom of it. So it saves some heartache and time and paper.
One more before we go to the next section, but I know trademark isn't like your ideal specialty, but like for franchisors that are emerging, again, I work with a lot of these sort of guys at the very start, and something I haven't actually asked before is like, do you actually own the trademark for your brand? And I know that a lot of them do, but I know there's also a lot that don't until it gets to like 10, 15 locations. Like, okay, time to register now. And it's like, man, what have you been doing? So I guess I'm after your advice. What are like the ballpark costs to do that if you know at the very beginning, and how important is it to get it right from the word go?
Yeah, so I'll deal with the last question of that first. It's so important to get it started from the outset. What you don't want is to have a situation where you've started to develop a brand, you are unaware what already exists in the sphere or in the marketplace, and then you get one of those nasty letters and you've got to debadge 12 stores. That's absolutely worst case scenario. So making sure that if you come up with a concept, our firm can certainly help with those, I guess, preliminary searches. They're not too expensive, perhaps a couple of $1,000s, if that, but certainly worth it, because paying digital agencies and, sign writers and all these creative people and then fit out and all of these other things is just so much more expensive if it's all for a waste.
And I, as a marketing agency, can't get in trouble if they haven't trademarked it, right?
No.
Checking for myself now?
Well, we'll have to have a look at your terms, Taylor. But so that's really important to get that right. Registering that and making sure that you register that in the appropriate classes so that you are working out exactly what the business is offering in the marketplace. How are you using that mark, and making sure that your registration reflects that. That's something that our team can work with you to do that. The costs in that are split up into professional costs of obviously giving advice and whatnot, but also then government costs that you have to pay to IP Australia. So again, it's a couple of $1,000s, but certainly worth it. The registrations last for a long period of time and then you renew them after that. But it is essentially the heart of franchising. You are licensing the brand.
Yes, 100%, right? Yeah.
And as a franchisee, if I'm coming to you and saying, hey, this is why I want to call myself XYZ, you want to know that it's registered and protectable. You have an opportunity to, so someone could come underneath you and register TFM, for example, and say, no, I'm TFM, I've been here the whole time. You then have to get into an annoying battle to be able to demonstrate that you've had prior use and then demonstrate that you've been using it for a period of time before this person has come onto the scene. And then it is over to the hands of IP Australia to make a determination, and you go through that long, costly process of putting on evidence and then having them respond. So to avoid all of that, do your due diligence, get it done.
Yeah.
One thing I also want to mention is that make sure that you come up with a name or a brand that is distinct and isn't descriptive of what you do.
Okay.
So we're having a lot of clients come to us and say, let's take an example. They produce protein shakes.
Yeah.
And they say, protein shakes
is our name.
And it's like, no, that's so descriptive. The government won't allow you to
just
register
get knocked back. Yeah.
Yeah, because it's descriptive and it's unfair and it describes a class of product or a class of services as opposed to a name or a concept. So making sure that you are getting that advice earlier on, again, to make sure that it's likely to pass the hurdle that IP Australia will have when you go to register your mark.
Awesome. Thank you. So what I do is very much local area marketing and community-based marketing. So really trying to get connected with each local community around a store, right? And the best way to do that we've seen in the past is by competitions. And competitions are fantastic. You get so many entries and engagements, but there's also a lot we need to understand that can go wrong when running a competition, right? And it varies pretty differently between different states. You kind of touched on it before, but do you have any tips, especially when I came to your seminar a few weeks ago, tips on how I can run a competition safely?
Yeah, so making sure that you have appropriately and properly mapped out exactly what the conditions are and what does the competition look like? How does someone qualify? What's an eligible, entrant? Mapping that out, having that really clear, and then coming to a lawyer and saying, this is what I want to do. What are the parameters that you think that I need to put in place to make sure that this is legal? You do need to develop terms and conditions for that particular giveaway or competition. And then depending if it's a game of chance or a game of skill, you might be considered to be running, say, a lottery, and you might need to apply for certain licenses or permits to be able to do that. And to your point, it does vary from state to state. So the benefit of HWLE is we're a national firm. We have specialists in all areas across the entire country who are able to give you the right advice at the right time.
Can I have one set of terms and conditions for all competitions I run, or is it no?
So, well, if it's designed the same, then yeah. But if it's fundamentally requiring someone to exercise, do something different to be eligible, then it's best to have a quick conversation. And even then, it might be tweaking this or having an adjustment here. You don't have to do a whole set of new terms.
Just change this date every single time, whatever it is.
Yeah. But it's worth having someone who does this day in, day out, have a look at that for you so that you don't, one, have to be up at night worrying about it, and two, have the dreaded knock on your door that you've not done the right thing. And let's be honest, the person who's going to complain about it, there are two. It's the regulator.
And the one who didn't win.
Yeah, exactly. It's the person who, is butthurt that they didn't win.
So we, Meta actually changed the rules maybe last year before, I can't remember, but it was, remember the old like this post to go into the competition? You can now not run those anymore. Your post will be limited on reach, and you can almost get your account blocked or restricted.
Yeah.
And I think Meta has taken a big stance on this. Crazy for Meta to do something like this, but they are taking a stance on stuff like that. So no longer can you do like this post or comment this word or anything like that. So I think franchisors need to educate their franchisees and, store owners and local bricks and mortar stores on how to run this stuff. They're still very effective, but you just got to do it the right way.
That's right. And I think, have an education piece and say, listen, this is not to come in and be big brother on you, but it's to make sure that, we're protecting you from you, actually. There are some tricky minefields that we have to work through. And hey, if it's a good idea, let's run it nationally and let's help you with that.
Yep.
I think, this is kind of inception here, but marketing the campaign in an appropriate way as well. So having, prominent statements that say guaranteed win and there's no guaranteed win is obviously problematic. So making sure it's pitched at an appropriate level where it's reflective of someone's chances of actually winning, or not overstating the benefits of the competition are really important. There's a number of competition laws that say, you can't say that you will be able to win, on a mega TV, and then they say, oh, unfortunately, that's already been won, but here's a smaller TV instead.
Yes.
So baiting and switching, those types of things need to be
Do you remember the Netflix documentary with Pepsi where they promised this guy a plane?
Oh, no,
Have
I
you
don't
seen
know
it?
about
Yeah.
it. No.
And he chased them down for years. I think it took him 10 years until he got to pay out for a plane because it was in their terms and conditions.
Awesome. Awesome. I love people who have time on
Yeah.
their hands to be able to do that. But also, it's the principle of it. Don't say
Right.
that
And
you're not going to
he
back
was
it
going to
up.
get his plane. Yeah. So that's external competitions. What about internal competitions? Like if I'm running a competition that the best store manager wins X, do I need to know anything from that perspective?
I don't think legally. I think it's more of a case of being transparent as to what the requirements are, making sure that everyone has a fair opportunity. It's more
Mhm.
of a commercial thing.
Yep.
Rewarding internally is such an effective mechanism to driving performance and rewarding positive behavior, even external recognition. So, the FCA have a number of awards for Field Manager of the Year or Franchise Woman of the Year, and looking at that and thinking, okay, this would be a really great addition to a prize that, say, our Field
Mm.
Manager of the Year wins.
Yep.
We're going to nominate you for this because
Yep.
it allows them to then start to develop their external profile. But legally, no, I think it's about just being transparent as to when the cutoff dates are, what's required, what are the expectations, because at the end of the day, it's not going to be the winner that's going to be upset. It's
Yeah,
going to be the
exactly.
loser. And you don't want to disencourage someone, but you don't want to, unmotivate people to do things, because there's nothing worse than dangling a carrot and them getting so close and then they feel like it's a benchmark that they are just never going to be able
Yep.
to win. That is awful for performance. If you're setting benchmarking, make sure it's attainable, make sure it's achievable, and make sure it's clear.
Mm. My next one for you, and again, as an ex-franchisee, I used to love these types of campaigns, but gift cards,
Oh,
and they've changed a lot in the last couple of years. So gift cards are great for revenue. You're kind of parking yourself and you're giving yourself a customer for a longer period. What has changed in the last couple of years that people need to be aware of?
yeah. So there's a minimum, expiry period now that's provided. So the minimum is it has to be offered for 3 years. Or unlimited, and that's to allow for customers the opportunity to be able to use them. I have a stash of them in my house that I don't know where they are, but it's going to be a payday when I do find them.
I'm going to use them.
Yeah, I'm going to run to the
Yeah.
shops and spend them. So it's great that they've acknowledged that you need more time to use them. So that's the first thing. Franchisors need to be really, really clear on the redeeming policy that exists among the network, particularly when that franchisee leaves the system.
Or closes down, or yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
So if they no longer exist, what happens? Who bears the responsibility? How does that work? What's fair? What's reasonable? And then how is that I guess, liability to be treated in from an accounting perspective? I am famously not an accountant, so I can't tell you on that. But
Yeah.
getting that right and making sure, is it considered to be, cash that's come in from day one, or is it, sitting there as a liability? That is something that the system needs to have a clear kind of perspective on, to make sure that they're not running out, of issues later on. And then managing cash flow. If you in a retail business, you're typically seeing that gift card sales are keeping you afloat during Christmas and over that break period. But then you might have a plateau period where sales are down, but you're also having to redeem those services.
Which, again, from a marketing perspective, I love. That gives us a list of people to go after with retargeting lists or email lists or SMS to get people back in store. We've already sold to them.
Yeah.
So gift cards play such an important role in this. We're working with a big restaurant group at the moment, famous restaurant group. I'm not going to name them, but they do so well with walk-ins, and I'm just trying to get them onto the train of selling gift cards for, 18th, 21st, hens parties. It's a whole nother revenue stream they haven't unlocked yet.
Absolutely. And I think mapping out, if you're in a health business, for example, there are so many national days of health dedicated to Men's Health Month or Women's Health Month or, Mental Health Month. Plotting that in your calendar, working out in the year where they exist, developing a campaign around that, Valentine's Day, Mother's Day, and then using gift cards as a way to kind of market that and then get their details from them to be able to on-sell further marketing opportunities is a really, really good strategy. So
let's switch gears. What I've been really impressed with ever since I've, become friends with you and worked with you is your own sort of personal branding and how you've really taken on social media content, right? So for professional services, it's not something we see regularly. I think you've gone really headfirst into this area and you're making content pretty much every day, right? Like you're recording videos. I think you even told me this morning you got 7 videos you want to create over the next 4 days. How are you fitting this in and what benefit are you seeing from your side of things?
Yeah, it's definitely a lot of work, and it's something that I've seen in my area that's not very common at the moment, although I am seeing people lean into it. The idea was kind of born from as a consumer, before I buy anything, I typically will Google and stalk someone online. I'm nosy like that. If I get an email from someone, I have to know what they look like.
Yeah.
So for me, I figured that, well, the buying of legal services is no different. And before someone comes to me, they've usually heard about me or they've been referred to, but they usually need that last, touch point on the buying journey to be convinced. So I thought, well, if I don't have anything there sitting there to explain what I do, who I'm affiliated with, the work that I do, who I'm endorsed by, then that's a blank space for that person to fill in their own narrative.
Yeah.
And that didn't sit well with me.
No.
So I thought, okay, let's take ownership of this narrative. And also, I want to work with people who want to work with me, and we just naturally, vibe. So I thought that online platforming was a really good opportunity to showcase who I am, what my values are, what I stand for. I think a lot of people think lawyers are not approachable. I like to think that I am.
I mean, I've said it before on this show, same with media agencies, right? I keep saying any marketing agency can buy media and do digital marketing. What they're buying is people, which is essentially the same for your firm as well, right?
Absolutely. And people come to me often, even though it is business related, it's often the worst point in their life,
stressed, overwhelmed.
They're stressed, they've not dealt with lawyers before. They're worried about how much it's going to cost. A piece of advice I gave yesterday, I'm not joking, was let's take a breath. I want you to make a cup of tea, get a bicky, let's sit down, we'll breathe, and then we'll work through this. I am a human, and I wanted that to come across in my platform. And I'm passionate about making sure that legal information is accessible to people, not just those who can afford it. So I think it creates a real opportunity to create your own narrative and allow people to see what you stand for and who you are before engaging with you, and getting rid of any preconceived ideas that they might have. And it's also just been so helpful online because I can see how well and how effective, pieces of content are doing. I think that posts where I'm more empathetic or I'm more emotional or I reveal more about me do so much better than my legal analysis and, print of a newsletter or, sexy new changes that have come out in the
or taking a photo at a conference,
Absolutely. And that's exactly where another idea was born from. So, I'm often at conferences and people love to go to a conference and take a photo of, the auditorium because they've just heard a fantastic speaker. And that's not to take away from the speaker, but
it's boring.
You then go
it's
on
really
LinkedIn,
boring, right? Yeah.
Absolutely. You go on LinkedIn and then you see that the same person or the same image from different vantage points. And then it's the same spiel about how inspiring and motivating
written by
it was.
ChatGPT, no doubt.
Yeah, with M dashes and all of that. And look, I do what you've got to do. But I just thought, no, you have to cut across the noise. You have to be different. And so I managed to convince my amazing partners that I work with, we're going to do a TikTok trend and we are going to show that we're here and Team HWLE are here. And it just took off. People were like, what? Lawyers showing personality? This is wild. And it allows you to kind of challenge perceptions that people might have about you or your industry or what you do, or communicate an image or a perception or a notion so much better than any other media. And then we also would sit through content and say, people are reading less than 14 minutes a day. They're not going to sit there and read my polished article.
Yeah.
So get in front of the camera, and it's been awkward.
Well, short form content is the way to go, right? So, So take me back. So again, take me back to when you first started to roll out this type of content. Being in a firm like yours, did people have opinions? Were you worried about what people would say internally around you now creating content that's different to what they've done traditionally?
Absolutely. My firm's been really, really supportive of it. But I've also been very conscious that, we are a national firm. There are so many employees that...
Well, even other law firms, right, looking at your content and being like, what is this crazy girl doing over here?
No doubt. But I'm very conscious that everyone who works at our firm shares the same brand that I share, and we're all custodians of the brand. So I treat it with respect, and I am very conscious that what I do is a reflection of everyone else. So, all the advice I've given earlier about sitting on things, I have notes in my phone of content ideas that I want to write. I sit on it, I perfect it, I come back to it. I think, okay, is it appropriate given on what's happening in the world? Is it unnecessarily political? Could it be offensive?
Do you get worried you're giving too much away?
In terms of personal...
No, like
insight?
legal advice.
No, because I think that you have to give to gain. And ironically, that was the message of the International Women's Day this year. And I do believe that It's how you apply it. And my, I guess, exotic kind of blend is that I'm able to give you the legal perspective, but I'm able to put it through a real world lens and give you commercial advice with that legal backing. And so I'm happy to give away the
But it's
legal
almost
advice.
like, tell me what I need to know in my words.
Exactly.
Right?
And I often say that. So to our junior lawyers, we're lawyers, we go through law school, we learn this skill, but it's almost like learning a language, and we have to translate, and we have to make sure we translate it in a way that's specific, not just to a layperson, but to the layperson's business. And how does that look in their context? How does that look in their management structure?
Yes.
You almost have to implant yourself and make sure that you're really living and breathing what this organization is doing. And much like a marketing agency, it's not going to work if that's not their ethos. You really need to know their DNA to make sure that it's authentic and it streamlines. But to answer your question, yes, I've had people say this is not working.
What's the segment that I love? It's what the franchising.
The franchising, yeah. So I just thought that was funny because often so many annoying things will happen or something crazy will happen. I'll be like, what the franchising? Hey, that's like a cool idea. So some people are nervous about it, and I think it's because they don't know enough about it. So for me, that's been a challenge to bring them on the journey and make sure that they understand where I'm going and ask them to be guests on it. And once they kind of see the professionalism and the I guess the structure that goes around it that people don't see. I think people think that you just set up a camera and you just go and it's silly and you just go from there. There's a lot of thought behind it. There's a lot of refining. There's a lot of time spent on getting it right. And then Australia has a really, really intense tall poppy
100%.
culture.
I was going to bring this up.
Yeah. So I think that it is scary. I'm going to be honest with you. It's nerve-wracking. I come from a traditional law firm that has a great reputation. It works with some of the best clients in the country, in the world. And it is scary to see how well the posts do. I had a post that I stood in front of and I was standing in front of the branding and it got, 510,000 views.
Wow.
And it was great. It was a positive post.
Yeah.
It was talking about how amazing my colleagues were to me in a time of personal tragedy and celebrating that and making sure that you go somewhere where you're supported and thrive. So it was objectively a great post. There is no way someone could say that was terrible. But it made me see that how quickly and viral it can go is really scary, because if that was a bad message or if someone
you
didn't
just got it
like
wrong slightly, you know what I mean?
100%, then I'm in the game of legal advice. So if it's wrong...
And deleting it doesn't just get rid of it, does it?
Absolutely. It looks worse, So you've got to kind of go, okay, I'm going to own this. And, you're not going to be for everyone. And I think that that's something that's, as a younger woman, that's really tricky to kind of sit with and accept. And I think logically we all wrap our head around it, but emotionally getting that and understanding that, but also trying to educate people as to the intention. I'm a team player. I'm trying to work with my firm and work with my colleagues to showcase how brilliant each of them are. It's not about putting myself as the leader or as myself as being better than anyone else. Because sometimes it can be taken as that and it can kind of be mischaracterized as arrogance. I'm just genuinely passionate about marketing.
I'm to go. Yeah.
I love it. I just love it. And you ask me, how do I have time? I make time.
Yeah.
I enjoy it.
Fit it in.
I was telling you this morning, I'm on the treadmill and I'm thinking of these ideas. And when I'm on my walks of the morning, I'm like, that's a really good post.
Gotta be in it to win it. Yeah.
Yeah. And just kind of thinking and mapping and being creative. I'm very black and white day to day. I've got a big whiteboard in my office about my marketing ideas. Some of them are trash.
And just give it a go.
But some of them are great. And, some of the conversations that I have with my clients afterwards where they said, I cannot believe that you did that. I love it.
So let's wrap up now. If people want to go see your socials or find you online, where can they find you?
So Emily Lucas, just Google. You'll
find you on LinkedIn.
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn. LinkedIn is my most successful platform. I'm not too good at TikTok or Instagram, or you won't find me on those. So.
Well, awesome. Thank you so much for jumping on today.
Thank you so much for having me.